Hi, it's Dan, the Real Estate Guy, coming to you from the home office once again, and today's topic is the long-term plans, the long-term strategies. You need to implement these along with your buying and selling so that someday you'll reach the other side. I define the other side as a point where your rental properties pay you more than you need to live on. I think a good target would be twice what you need. So whatever you need right now, just total it up. You probably know what your monthly budget is, how much you need to bring in to make things happen for you, to pay all your bills comfortably. If you had twice that coming in right now from rental properties that were well managed, that were maintained, that had good tenants, imagine what that would feel like. Because it feels real good. It really does. It's nice to have that flow coming in. My entire lifestyle right now is paid for by properties I've owned since '93 and '94. If I didn't have those properties, this little boom and bust period, the fall where I couldn't buy and sell very much at all, almost 2 years I had to wait while the market was falling straight down. I tried. I made offers all the time. I just had to make them so low that I never got much together. I mean, a few of them. And some of those were bank-owned. The banks backed out, So it was very difficult to get a transaction purchased, closed, and then sold while the market was moving straight down. I may have mentioned in the 90s when it fell more gently, it fell 24% over a 3-year period. Contrast this time to 60% in 3 years or so. I could buy and sell ahead of it all the way. All right? But bottom line is, if I didn't have the long-term strategies in place, it would have been tough to stay in business at all. All right? It would have been really, really tough. I mean, I knew I had that income coming in every month. And so I could be patient. I didn't have to force transactions, and therefore I didn't do very many because the prices were falling like a rock. I suppose if a person had to buy and sell during that time because they had no long-term plan or no long-term strategy or properties paying them every month, they might have forced a transaction now and then that would have lost them money as the market plummeted. I'm kind of thankful that the banks didn't take some of those offers that were close. I'm thankful that I had discipline so that when I made an offer and the bank counter-offered, they thought they were giving me a deal. I didn't think so, so I didn't take it. I used discipline to not do those deals. But having a long term is where you really want to be at some point so that you don't have to buy and sell. When you don't have to do something, it's more enjoyable. You don't have to do your job because your real estate pays you more than your job. You can always make a change with that job situation if that's what you'd like to do. You could take some time off. You could shop around for a more fun job if you wanted to continue working rather than just do real estate. So something to think about. And a lot of the long-term strategies are not market dependent. In other words, we don't depend on the market to go up. You'll notice when we buy and sell, we're not depending on a market to go up. That's what the quote-unquote flippers did. They gave kind of flipping a bad name. Those folks needed a market to move in order to make money. I kind of take offense if someone says I'm a flipper. I thought that was very unprofessional. They were buying a property and just hoping it would go up to sell it right away. It worked. It worked until it didn't, right? All right. We buy wholesale. We already know what we can get for the property before we buy it, or we wouldn't be buying it. All right? At the hold situation, again, strategy doesn't require the market to move up. Right? It's supposed to cash flow right now. You've already captured some equity because you purchased it below market. You created a positive cash flow. Sure, you'd like rents to go up over the years, and they probably will, but you're not dependent on it. You're not depending on the retail value to go up. You're not depending on rents to go up. You're successful with the way you purchased it. It pays you every month. You're now getting what we call paid to wait. You'll do rent studies over the years. As the rent goes up, you'll increase your rents. That's wonderful. You might, once in a while, check the retail value and notice that perhaps it's going up a little bit. It's probably going to move very gently at first and before it takes off. It could be many, many, many years before we have another boom and bust. But you'll be ready. Now, let's go back to that theme of not depending on what the market does. If you have some stabilized rental properties, and they're cash flowing so well. Let's say you use private money and they still cash flow very well even with the high rate. That means there's a chance you can go out and get a 15-year loan and still have a nice positive cash flow. If you don't need a lot of cash flow from these properties right now, and by doing a 15-year it cuts it a little bit for you, but you have enough properties where that positive still adds up to a significant number for you right now, think about the power of paying those properties off in 15 years. It sounds like a long time, but it really isn't. It'll go by pretty quick. Once you pass the 10-year point, 12, 13-year point, you'll see those loans just accelerating, paying themselves off. Remember, in 15 years, they're gone. So you're building equity even though the value's not going up. You see? A lot of people think they're going to buy a property and they're going to gain all this equity, and that's wonderful. Maybe that will happen. But you've got a technique now with a 15-year loan on a long-term hold property. It's getting equity quickly already. Maybe not years 1, 2, 3, but certainly from about year 7, halfway point, 7.5, moving towards that 15. The amount, you'll see it right on your statement if it's a type of loan where they send you a statement. The amount of money of the payment that you're sending in, which is the rents, by the way, right? You're keeping some, you're keeping the positive cash flow. You're putting the rent money right in there. You're paying that payment down. You're going to see that the principal pay down starts to really accelerate. Now you're building equity even if the market's still flat. You're just building equity that whole time. It's a wonderful thing. Now, some people will have a property that doesn't quite cash flow with that 15-year loan, or they don't like the positive cash flow with the 15-year loan. You don't have to use that method. You know, a lot of times with an income property, I'll get the longest loan I can find. There was a time where they were doing those 40-year loans. I'd do it because it gave me flexibility. If the property was doing really well and had a lot of positive cash flow, and everything else I had was also doing very well, there could be months where I would pay an additional principal amount each time. Did you realize that when you look at these loans, you might be able to do this for your loan on your own home? If you get a statement and it shows how much of your payment is paying down the principal, remember at the beginning of ownership there's very little principal being paid. As the number of years goes on, that principal amount grows. But did you realize that when you look at that statement and you see how much is going towards principal, if you pay that much more, let's say it's $200, your payment's $1,200 on your house, and $200 of that is principal pay down. You realize if you just paid $200 more per month, each month you look at the statement and you pay the amount that's going towards principal, pay that amount extra, paying that principal down a little bit each month, if you have the income to do that, you're taking one full payment off the back. So if it's a 30-year loan and you started doing that right away, you're taking one payment right off the back, right? So in the first few years of a 30-year loan, it's very little principal being paid. You know, it might be 50 bucks, it might be, you know, some small amount. Pay that amount extra and it literally takes one payment off the back end, the 30-year mark. So now it's working this way for you, right? Everybody, then you could pay off a 30-year loan in 15 years by implementing that technique, but you have the flexibility. If things get tight, just make your regular payment. Where when you finance with the 15-year, you're stuck with that payment. When you finance with the longer loan, and then just pay a little extra principal each month, you're still going to pay it off in far less than 30 years. Now realize, we said that that amount that pays towards principal gets bigger as the years go on. So when you're approaching year 15 on a 30, it's a huge amount of principal to pay each month. But if you've built your real estate up over time, that shouldn't be a problem. And also it gives you the flexibility of going back to your standard payment. But you will have paid your principal down dramatically over the years by doing that extra payment. It's a fun technique, gives yourself flexibility, because you've also probably heard of those loans you can do in your home where they take your money twice a month. You know, instead of making 12 payments a year, you make extra payments because they take an amount every few weeks automatically. Cuts down the amount of interest you pay. It pays more principal that way. It's like you're making an additional payment or two, right? So you can do the same thing by just making an additional payment. If your payment's $1,200 a month and you have a real good month on your job, maybe you're on commission sales, or maybe you've been buying and selling real estate, you pay a lump sum, pay some principal down. It does the same thing. The idea behind these long-term strategies is whether you just pay your normal payment and build a little bit of equity over time when you're waiting for the market to go back up and you're enjoying your positive cash flow, or whether you pay a lot by buying and selling and maybe what we call chunking that loan down. Imagine you buy and sell a property and make $20,000 or $25,000. You've got 2 little rentals that you plan to help you retire, right? You'd like to have those things paid off. What if you bought and sold a few properties a year and paid an additional $10,000 of the principal right on down? It's going to make a huge difference. So the long-term strategies that we're talking about now are really important, even if you're focused on the buying and selling. Pick up a property at least once a year, put it on the long-term strategy, and that way, years from now, you'll be surprised when the years go by and you look out, it's been 8, 9, 10 years, you've got 8 or 9, 10 properties, they're all doing well. You'd be surprised how powerful that is, how much of a difference it makes in your life. Now remember we talked about paying some loans off in 15 years? Let's say you didn't want to do any of that. You didn't want to do 15-year loans. You had long-term loans on those things. You didn't want to accelerate the pay down. Well, here's another way you can do it. Let's say, as a strategy, you decide, to have my money coming in that puts me on the other side, all I really need is 3 or 4 or 5 free and clear houses that I owe nothing on, or a couple of duplexes and a couple of houses. That's all I need. All right? Well, here's how you do it. You buy those, right? You buy one a year. You're reaching that 10, 12-year mark. You got 10, 12 properties. And let's say finally the market starts showing signs that it's going to go back up. And we're going to point out those signs to you. And this is a long-term relationship if you want it to be. But we're going to point out when the market's going to turn. Just like I pointed out when it was going to crash. There's signs. One of the main ones is inventory. We're going to watch the inventory. As an expert, perhaps you'll be watching the inventory in your area. We know in my area that when the market was on fire the last couple of times, the supply side was only about 3,500 listings. Right now we have 8,500. Right? The demand was about 2,200 closed transactions per month. There would have been more had there been more listings. Almost everything that got listed got sold. Right? Like that, sometimes with more offers. That's a hot market. When I see our inventory drop at some point, it's likely to go up, but when it starts dropping, if it's not just a fake out where it drops and goes back up, I'm going to be watching that. If it drops below 5,000 units for sale in my area, it's going to have my attention. If it continues down, I'm going to think it's time to load up. Meaning, whatever properties I have in my equity garden, watch that video, equity garden, it's part of this really. Whatever I already have, if I can, I'm going to buy more. Because I think that last group of properties I buy, I may not have to hold that long. Maybe I've had 9, 10 years by that point. But what about if I think the market's going to make its move pretty soon? Remember, I'm not going to count on it. I'm going to continue to buy smart, buy properties that don't depend on the market going up, buy properties that the cash flow will be good. But if my inclination is it's about to, it would be nice to buy some additional properties, and here's why. Remember we talked about paying those loans off in 15 years, either with a 15-year loan or doing a 30-year loan and paying additional principal and getting it done faster. That's fine, but some of you maybe didn't want to do that, or your properties didn't quite fit. They didn't fit with the 15-year. They wouldn't have been a positive flow. What if you had additional properties that you purchased with the intent was to sell those when things take off and free and clear your favorite ones, the ones that have the best location, the ones that you've done all the maintenance on, there's no deferred maintenance, the ones that have the best school districts and attract the best families, the best tenants. Therefore, you'll know over time which ones are the best ones to hold on to. They require the least amount of management because they attract the right kind of tenant. You'll have other properties that seem to be a pain in the butt all the time. It's like they're always going vacant. Something's wrong there, right? But right now it's rented. Or maybe it does go vacant and the market's hot. That's the best time to sell it, right? Vacant with a lockbox, single family home, that's the way to sell it. So my point is, when you get to that next market and things start to take off, if you didn't use the other techniques to free and clear your properties in that time period that you wanted to retire, or wanted to make some changes in your life and live on your income from your properties, you didn't pay those loans off, or you didn't accelerate their payoff, you can just simply pay them off completely by selling part of your holdings and paying that off. In this last market, I've always, I'm looking at loan chains, what people did. I always find it interesting when I see someone who timed it just right. I know they didn't mean to, it just happened. But a guy buys a property around here in, say, 2001. We're about at 2001 prices now, all right? But let's say he buys the year 1999, 2000, 2001. The market then turned and it went up, and it just went straight up, right? So maybe he bought a duplex around 1999, would have been about 125,000. In 2004 or 5, 400,000. I mean, that's not supposed to happen. And we don't know if the next one will be that dramatic, but it doesn't need to be. What if you buy that duplex at 125? It's paying you $300-400 a month positive cash flow. You've owned it for a while. You see the market start to turn. There's still more duplexes available for you or houses, and you buy them. The market turns and it runs. Remember, we're not going to sell in year 1. We're not going to sell probably in year 2. We're going to watch the inventory tight, but probably year 3 is the time to sell. And as things are really hot, supply is low, meaning inventory is low. Demand is high, which means everybody wants real estate. You saw that happen last time. Don't forget what that was like. People were practically wrestling on your lawn for your house. All right? A friend of mine told me that when people are wrestling on your lawn for your house, that's when you're supposed to sell it to them. And that's a sign of a top. When there's 5 offers on each house, right? 10 offers. People are offering over full price. All right, take a good look at your long-term hold properties. Some you've owned for 10 years. Some you were wise enough to buy just 2 years ago when you saw the inventory was changing. You pick out the ones that would give you the kind of income you want, the kind of management that you're looking for, low hassles, the least headaches, right? You pick those out. You pick out the ones that have been problems, plus any others that you own, and your plan is to sell those. In other words, harvest your equity garden. You bought them below market, but now they've zoomed up and they've got a tremendous amount of equity. And what you're going to do is figure out, okay, which ones do I sell that will pay the other ones off and make them free and clear? Now you'll get together with your accountant or your CPA or somebody for tax advice. You might have to sell an extra property or two to take care of that end of it. All right, but that's between you and your tax guy. We're not going to give you any advice on taxes here. But bottom line is you're looking for another way to get to that free and clear mark. All of a sudden you have 4 or 5 properties free and clear. If rents today on these duplexes are $850 a month, I don't know what they'll be in the next market, but my guess is they'll be higher. So if you had $1050 coming in instead of $850, for example, a couple $100 more per month, you could actually plan out and go, you know, life would be better if I just owned these 6 properties or these 5 properties, whatever it is. You can calculate the expenses. You know the expenses, right? You know what kind of bills they get every month. They're your properties. They're stable. They're rented. You know which ones have had to have turnover more often than others. So you're picking the best ones. You're harvesting some equity over here. They're paying those off. And for all practical purposes, you're done. All right? You made it to your end game. You can go fishing or whatever it is you were going to go do, right? But you've got your properties paying you every month. Some of you are going to enjoy this so much that even in your retirement years, you're probably going to continue to buy and sell properties. You just might do less of them, right? You might do the fun ones, and you might not do big volume. But this is just something to think about. I need you to think long term. I know we're here to learn fast. I know some of you want to move real quick. You want to do the buy sells. You know, you're looking forward to this business, but I want you to think about the long term. All right, think about the long term. Make a plan. Sit down and write it out. It's okay to change it later, but I want you to write a plan now. You know, we're going to add to this. There's going to be some advanced techniques in this area as well. So right now we're giving you all the nuts and bolts. Do not forget long-term planning and long-term strategies. And I'll see you on the next video. Thanks.